One reason why the panel study of income dynamics, PSID, is so valuable is that it collects data within the context of families and follows those families over time. Take a minute to think about your own extended family. Picture them 10 years ago. Where did they live? Who was living there? Who was married to whom? Were there children? What jobs did they have? Were they in school? Now think about them all today. Who has moved? Who has gotten married or divorced? Where are the children now? Have they moved out? Are they in college? Do you know where all of your cousins live? Has anyone moved in with grandparents to take care of them? Are there new babies? Who has changed jobs? Now think of what it takes to keep track of thousands of families over a longer period of time. That is the challenge of PSID. The first concept we will cover is FAS sample membership. Our sample consists of people we hope to collect data about throughout their entire lives. Some of these people we interview directly. Others may never be interviewed. They live in families with others whom we interview. 1968 was wave 1 of the study. In 1968, everyone who was in a family we selected for interviewing became a sample member. This included the adults and children living in the households that were selected at that time. When we added new sample in 1997, 1999, and then again in 2017, 2019, we followed the same pattern. But for the rest of this presentation, we will refer to 1968 as the starting point. As we know, families change over the decades. For example, children are born, family members pass away, and new spouses enter the family. Only some of the new people who came into our families after 1968 are actually considered sample members. These are the people who are the lineal descendants of the original members born after Wave 1. Whether original Wave 1 or subsequent generations, we think of our PSID sample members as having the PSID sample gene. They pass this on to their children, who become sample, and pass the gene on to their children. People who have the sample gene are part of our sample. As our sample members grow up and form their own separate households, we add their families to the study. We call these new families split-offs. You may have realized that some people in our families do not have the PSID sample gene. New spouses who marry into our families are a prime example. Any children from a previous relationship that the new spouse brings along would also not be sample members. We list these non-sample members as part of the family, but we do not interview them if they move out. Let's look at a fictional family to illustrate these points about sample membership, non-sample family members, and new study families.
Suppose that in 1968, one of our original study families consisted of a married couple, Rex White and his wife Regina. Since this is an original study family, both Rex and Regina would have the PSID sample gene. Now suppose that when we went to interview them the next year, the family had changed. They had a new daughter, Susan White. Since Susan White is the direct descendant of at least one sample member, she too will have the PSID sample gene. Now, fast forward a few years to about, say, 1987. Even more family changes have taken place. Regina has passed away, and Rex is remarried to Yvette. In addition, Susan White has moved out and set up her own household, where she's living with some other people not related to her. Do you know who has the sample gene? Only Rex and Susan White have the gene. Rex was in the original 1968 family, and Susan White is his descendant. You will be happy to know that you will not have to make a decision about whether a new person in a family is or is not a sample member. The study staff does that. But knowing how sample membership works will help you understand the extended families better. It will also help you provide information to the study staff that they will need to make decisions on sample membership. Now that the PSID has been going for so long, it's very common for our original 1968 families to have split up into several distinct but related families. Each family must have at least one sample person, but they frequently have others who have joined the family but are not sample, such as spouses. Continuing with our fictional family, a lot has happened since 1987. In the current interviewing wave, the family situation might look something like this. Rex and his second wife Yvette are still with us in one family. They remain in the study because Rex is a sample member. Note, if Rex had passed away, we would not interview his widow Yvette. Susan White married Andrew Hernandez and set up her own household without the previous housemates. We interview this family because Susan White is a sample member. Because her previous roommates did not have the gene, we did not follow and interview any of them. During the intervening years, Susan and Andrew had a son, Andrew Hernandez Jr. He has the sample gene because one of his parents, Susan, has it. He moved into his own household, married Rose Perez, and they had a child, Andrew Hernandez III. Andrew III has the sample gene, passed down from Rex to Susan, to Andrew Jr., and to him. So you can see that where there was one family in 1968, there are now 3 related families, each with at least one sample member. We also refer to those with the PSID gene as being followable. That means that wherever they go, we will follow them.
As you learned, we're mainly interested in the people with what we call the PSID sample gene. But this study is about families, so we also want to know some things about the non-sample people who live with our sample members too. As you might imagine, keeping track of tens of thousands of people in more than 11,000 families is quite a job, especially with all the family changes that take place. Let's now learn how we keep track of them all using our sample numbering system, starting with families. Each family we interview is given an identification number called a sample ID. This is called SID for short, and sometimes you will hear it referred to as SID. The SID is assigned by the study staff, not the interviewers. However, it's important that you understand a few things about it. Here's an example. 1152-001. Each sample ID uniquely identifies a family within the study. Notice that the sample ID has 2 parts, a 4-digit number and then a dash followed by a 3-digit number. The first part of the SID is called the 1968 ID, or just the 68 ID. This 4-digit number was the interview number of an original 1968 study family. If that family is still being interviewed, it still has 1152 as its 68 ID and as the first part of its sample ID. In addition, all families that were formed when the members of the original 1152 family moved out also have 1152 as the first part of their sample ID. In this way, you can tell which families are related to each other because they are descendants of an original family. In other words, this is how we identify all members of an extended family. Since these families don't all live together, we need to know a way to distinguish all the families that are related and have the same 68 ID. That's the job of the second part of the sample ID, which is called the family extension. It is a dash and a 3-digit number. In our example, the family extension is 001. This family extension differentiates each current family in a 68 ID from the others. When you put them together, you get the full sample ID. Only one family in the study will have this unique 7-digit number. Any other family in the same 68 ID would have a different family extension, for example, -002. Let's go back to our fictional example family.
Suppose their 68 ID is 2995. In our example, we have 3 related families in this 68 ID. Each one has its own different family extension. Here, Rex and Yvette's sample ID is 2995-041. Andrew Hernandez and Susan White are 2995-002. And Andrew Hernandez Jr. and his family are 2995-161.
Finally, in the numbering system, we also have to identify individual people in the study. With each 68 ID, each person is assigned a unique number called a person number, or PN for short. These are assigned by the study staff, not by interviewers. You will see person numbers in a number of places, including the respondent profiles and on the 68 ID website, but you will not use them often, only if asked for clarification, and your team leader will assist you. Notice that the PN is also a 3-digit number, but it is different from the family extension and is not part of the sample ID. In summary, the sample ID is a unique number for each family in the study. 4-digit 1968 ID followed by a dash and a 3-digit family extension. Person numbers are not part of the SID and are used primarily by PSID staff to identify persons and families. When you are ready to start interviewing, a number of family cases will be assigned to you. Each case or sample line is often referred to as a cover sheet or CS. This is a holdover from when the study was done on paper and each family had a physical cover sheet with address information, the family listing, and space for call notes. Nowadays, all of this is electronic, but we still use the word cover sheet. Each wave of the study, we determine what type of cover sheet each family has. Cover sheet types are another way we organize and keep track of our families. There are 3 main types. Let's talk about each one of them. By far, the majority of your cases will be families that we interviewed in the previous wave. These are called re-interviews or re-interview cover sheets. Each wave of the study, there are some families that we are not able to interview. Perhaps they refuse or we are unable to locate them. The next wave, we try to contact them again. These are called recontacts, recontact cover sheets, or simply recons for short. During the current wave of interviewing, if we find that some sample members have moved out of their families, we create new split-off cover sheets. Sometimes a single person moves out of a family and a split-off cover sheet is created just for him or her. Sometimes a group of people move out. For example, a couple with children divorces and one of the parents moves out with the kids. If someone pre-listed on a recontact cover sheet is no longer in the family, they will become either a split-off or another recon line, depending on the move-out date. A split-off line generated from a completed recontact interview, split recon, is the fourth and least common cover sheet type. In your work, you will treat these just like split-offs. It is important to understand the three main types of cover sheets because your approach to each one will be slightly different. For example, re-interviews are often easier to locate since they were last interviewed 2 years ago in the most recent previous wave. They often participated for many waves and are familiar with the study. Recontacts have not been interviewed for 4 years. Their interview will be longer since you will need to collect missing information. The reasons that they were not interviewed last wave can vary. They may have refused. We might not have been able to locate them before the end of the field period. Or they may just not have answered the phone after many contact attempts. Sometimes they're reluctant to participate this wave, but that is not always the case. Split-offs may know nothing about the study. For example, the split-off may be a young person and their parents may never have mentioned the study to them. You will learn more about recontacts and split-offs during training, but there is one important fact about them that we need to mention. Recons and split-offs are considered potential separate study families. We only take an interview on a recontact or a split-off cover sheet if we find that they are living independently of any re-interview cover sheet family. If they have moved back in with a re-interview cover sheet, we will simply add them to the re-interview cover sheet. We want the people on recontact and split-off cover sheets in the study, but we don't want to interview them as separate families unless they are really living on their own.